cover. Together, we are Los Angeles strong. KBLA Talk 1580. Your voice, your community, your station.
All's my life I has to fight. All's my life hard times like bad trips like Nazareth, I'm f***ed up, homie, you f***ed up. But if God got us, then we gon' be alright.
We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Huh? We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright.
And when I wake up, I recognize you looking at me for the pay cut. Bahamas, I be looking at you from the face down. One Mac 11 even.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. You are listening to the Black Pack. I'm your host, Adrianne Shropshire in Los Angeles. We are going to be all right. It is crazy right now, but we know one thing is always true, is that Angelinos will come together and we will make it all right. People are helping each other. They are going through mutual aid. I saw on social media, on Instagram, I think, and even though we're just having that whole conversation about the challenges of mis and disinformation, there's still good things that can happen on our social media platforms. I saw some folks, just regular folks, who just bought a block of hotel rooms and asked people to reach out to them if they needed a place to stay because they got them. And so I think we're seeing Angelinos from across the region come together and support. And so I think that we're going to be all right. With all of the things that are happening in our city and in our county and in our region, there's also a bunch of other things happening. So I want to just hit on quickly a few things that that happened this week. I'm gonna skip over, I think, the anniversary of the insurrection that happened earlier this week, and I worry that I'm gonna skip over it just because we could talk about this. This could be an entire segment of what happened on that day, how we saw an attempted coup that when it ended, we thought it was over, but clearly it was ongoing and had its sort of manifestation on November 5th when Donald Trump won, where he will be inaugurated on the steps where he sent people to stop Congress from certifying the last election. That certainly happened this week. We also saw folks in Washington, D.C. and in Georgia and around the country pay tribute to Jimmy Carter as he was mourned and laid to rest. All of the living former presidents and their spouses, except for one notable exception, were present and for that, and that was First Lady Michelle Obama. I was struck, certainly, when I saw the pictures, realizing that had she been there, she would have had to sit next to Donald Trump. So I don't know what the official reason is why she wasn't there, but certainly that reality would have kept me away. We also know that Donald Trump tried to get out of being sentenced for his conviction of 34 felony counts in what people called the hush money case. He went to ask the Supreme Court to help him out. Get him out of having to go to New York and be sentenced. And there was a 5-4 decision that I think folks are aware of that said that no, he could not skip out on being sentenced for crimes that he was convicted of. And you can imagine who the 4 were who said that, nah, that's okay. He shouldn't have to go to sentencing. The 5 are the 3 generally liberal-leaning justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, and then joined by the Chief Justice and Amy Coney Barrett. So that is what got Trump today in front of the judge, where he was essentially given no sentence. So all of that to say, yes, you are the first president to be sworn in, who is a convicted felon, but you are not going to be punished for the crimes that you committed. His former lawyer, maybe, but certainly loyalist Rudy Giuliani, he likely is not going to get out of all of that. He is in trial now, disgraced lawyer, slammed by federal judge for his ongoing lies about the 2020 election, about his attacks on poll workers in Georgia, who he owes a lot of money to black women, and continues to try and get out of having to pay them. But he is not Donald Trump, and he will not get out of paying Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman what he owes them for disparaging them and putting them in harm's way. The other thing that happened today that we maybe will spend a little bit more time on another show is that the U.S. Department of Justice announced the results of its review and evaluation of the Tulsa race massacre. So given that it has been over 103 years since the horrific events in Tulsa, the DOJ found the statute of limitations has long passed, and there's no one living to be charged. However, under the leadership of Associate Attorney General Kristen Clark, who is a brave soul, whose name we should all know because she has done his just Herculean work in her time in the DOJ leading the Civil Rights Division, found that even though no one can be held criminally accountable in the court of law for what happened in Tulsa, that there needed to be a historical reckoning. So we are, gonna miss certainly having a civil rights division and someone leading it who understands the importance of upholding the law and protecting our communities and calling out past harm in the present and calling out past harm as well, and making sure that those who were responsible for past harm are actually identified. And so one of the things that the new report does is it removes the responsibility that the DOJ, the Department of Justice at the time when the Tulsa massacre happened, placed the responsibility on black men. This report turns that on its head. So it is important for the historical record. So we're headed into a new era of the Trump administration. We know that we'll see more denial of our history, distortion of the truth, as we just talked about in the last hour. And it's going to be important for us to bear witness to that, but also to talk about how we stand up and take action. We know that there are many folks planning to make sure that our opposition to authoritarianism is made clear and made real. When we come forward, we're going to talk to Tamika Middleton, the managing director of the Women's March, and talk about what is coming up and some big plans for activations that are coming up. So stay with us. We have a lot to talk about. You were listening to The Black Pack. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
You're part of The Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
The smarter way to clean your floors. It's time to make the swap. Swiffer Power Mop.
Introducing the new Swiffer Power Mop, the all-in-one tool that gives you a mop and bucket clean in half the time. The solution's built right in, so no heavy bucket, and the pad has hundreds of scrubbing strips to get deep into grout. Don't mop harder, mop smarter.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
At Charmin, we heard you shouldn't talk about going to the bathroom in public, so we decided to sing about it.
Charmin Ultra Strong. You can use less, better than the rest. Charmin Ultra Strong. Your booty past the clean test. Salmon weave texture, it's the best. Study up, teach a lesson on fresh. Your booty past the clean test. Yes, sir. Charmin Ultra Strong.
Charmin Ultra Strong with diamond weave texture cleans better than the leading one-ply brand, so you can use less. Enjoy the go with Charmin.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you, neighbor to neighbor, bringing you resources and what you need to know. Sign up for Notify LA on your phone to get fire danger alerts and updates, or check on lafd.org. The Watch Duty app is free and provides wildfire maps and updates in real time. Keep your gas tank full and plan your route in case you have to leave the area. City and county officials are urging you to pack a go bag so you can be ready to leave your home quickly in case of an evacuation order. Your go bag should include a couple of days of clothing, copies of your important documents and ID, money, insurance information, your medications, electronic devices, batteries, chargers, a small radio, and emergency contacts. If you receive an evacuation order, gather your loved ones, grab your bag, your pet food, and leave immediately. For information on shelters for your pets or even your family, call 211 for the City of Los Angeles and 311 county-wide. Wearing a mask outside will help protect you from smoke, toxic fume, and particulate matter. If you don't need to go out, it's best to stay home with the windows closed. Getting to know your neighbors is a great way to stay safe, stay connected, and share resources. And Angelinos are stepping up to help, so reach out and find the assistance you need. Mutual Aid LA Network is constantly updating a Google Sheet with mutual aid resources. You can find it at tiny.cc-malan-fire. The earlier you make a plan, the better off you'll be when every second counts. Praying for LA, preparing, and standing with you. KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, and we are the Black Plaque, and we are very excited to be joined by Tamika Middleton, the Managing Director of the Women's March. Hi, Tamika. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So I wanted to, as we're thinking, but we've been talking today about mis and disinformation, right? About how it lands in the Black community, how it spreads, and how we can sort of protect ourselves from it, and how our social media platforms obviously play a role in moving information that is not helpful to us. And so we talked about like we also talked a little bit about how do we protect ourselves, like what can we do, and we are about to move into a new and yet familiar moment of Donald Trump being the head of this country, and we know what that brings with it. It brings lots of propaganda, it brings lots of lies, but it also brings with it the real sort of personification of resilience from people being unwilling to just step back and let things happen. And so we're 8 years from the original Women's March, which was sort of the after the 2016 election was the sort of the first big response in terms of people in this country saying we're not just going to sit down and watch this happen. This year, we have being planned a People's March, which I think is, sort of obviously includes women, but is broader than that, planned for January 18th, which is next Saturday. And so I think my first question to you is, how is this march going to be? How is this march different from the original Women's March?
Absolutely, and I would love to circle back to this question around misinformation, disinformation before we get off.
Yes.
But for the People's March that's coming up, one of the things that we've been having conversations with our partners and with our base over the past year or so that are really about the ways in which the attacks we are seeing on abortion access, the attacks we're seeing on birth control, the attacks we're seeing on LGBTQ folks, on voting rights, on education, how they feel disparate and they keep us running in lots of different directions. Right. But honestly, when you look at who's funding them, when you look at sort of, the underpinnings of who our opposition is, they're all the same folks, right? They're all these threads from the same from the same groups, and they have this sort of coordinated strategy to move and to advance this progress towards fascism and authoritarianism. And so what we have to be about in the movement is building the kind of movement coordination and cross-pollination that allows us to respond to this coordinated threat in a coordinated fashion. And so that's what we're trying to build here. We've been, building a number of efforts to sort of build this sort of cross-movement coordination. And the People's March is sort of one opportunity for us to practice together how to do that. And so we've built this big coalition, hundreds of organizations, and it's a sense of movement of movements because there are a number of coalitions that are part of the coalition. And they cut across a lot of issues. They cut across a lot of demographics. And we're really saying, how can we build a mobilization that helps us to build the biggest tent possible so we can build power that can contend to win in the next 4 years and beyond.
It's so important because I think that one of the things that we heard a lot during last year's election was people saying to us, whether it was during some of the focus groups that we were doing or on the doors when we were having conversations with people, this idea that it was important to people to make sure that we were that the dots were being connected, right? That this isn't just about a single issue, but it's about a whole bunch of issues that essentially amounts to the erosion of what people thought had been fundamental rights that were be protected for all time, right? Whether that's voting rights, whether it's education access or abortion access, right? The idea that there were some things that we had already fought and won, and that we would be able to keep. And so the people make those connections already, and so the necessity maybe of the organizations that represents folks' interests, or as you said, sort of coalition of coalitions, to in real time make those connections feels really important in this moment as well.
Absolutely. Audre Lorde teaches us that we do not lead single issue lives, so there is no single issue struggle. And so we are bringing and building a mobilization across the country, and even actually now in multiple countries, that is bringing organizations that work on poverty and labor, that are bringing organizations that work on housing and immigration, democracy, anti-war. So just really from all the different parts of the struggle, because we know that you can find in any individual's lives a number of those issues really intersecting. And so it felt really important, and it feels really important for us to be in coordination, to be building a kind of muscle around working together, because we know the attacks are going to be real, and we're going to need all of us.
Yeah, and there'll be the kinds of attacks that folks have at least this generation of folks have not seen before. So let me ask you about is that sort of the primary goal then of the People's March? Is it to sort of bring folks together and to start to both build and exercise that muscle, or are there other things that the coalition hopes to accomplish through the march?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that is a big part of it, is really this sort of movement, how we strengthen and how we bolster the movement broadly. Also, we are always thinking about, I would say for Women's March in particular, when we talk about the marches, we talk about them as an opportunity to bring people into the movement, that there's really no lower barrier of entry into the movement than to just show up at a march, right? And so every time we do this, 80% of the folks are new. And so we recognize, we have heard people talk about how exhausted they feel. And we recognize that in order to build a sustainable movement, we have to have new energy, new folks who are newly politicized that are coming in, that we are training or building skills. So that's another goal that we're having, is how we bring more people in. And then the third big thing that we've been thinking about, and we're thinking really intentionally about this in this mobilization, is how we then, once we brought those people in, how do we think really intentionally about how we absorb them into the movement, how we connect them to organizations and formations where they can continue to do this work. And they can continue to fight and resist on the other side of the action. And so, it's really important for us to name and to talk about the reality that a march is a single day event, but the movement is a commitment, right?
Yeah.
And so this is just one part. This is really thinking of it not as the end game, but really as a kickoff to the struggle there will be in during the Trump presidency.
Yeah. So I think you said two things that feel really important in this moment. So you talked about, we're not quoting Audre Lorde, right? Like we're not single issue people, and but one of the things that can happen, right, is that organizations, but also individual people can feel isolated, and so this idea of bringing people in and giving them a way to express their beliefs, right, to express their sense of what needs to happen or what can happen in the country, and then tying them, right, to other organizations that they might join, right, and stay, so that they don't feel isolated in the era that we're about to head into. So can you talk a little bit about some of the other coalition partners and sponsors for the march, the types of organizations that folks might be able to, you might go to the march and then you might leave the march and say, actually, I believe in this thing and this organization represents that, and I'm going to go be a part of that effort.
Absolutely. So, like I said, there are a number of coalitions, and maybe how I'll talk a little bit about this is to think about the way that the action in DC is sort of organized is by kickoff. So we start really with these kickoff programming, and the kickoff programming is organized a bit by theme and organization. So there's one kickoff that is just for the DC homies, all the organizations that organize in DC that are fighting for DC home rule. So there are also Harriet's Wildest Dreams, DC Palestinian Youth Movement, a number of organizations that are DC based. They'll be talking about what is important for folks who live in D.C. and who are fighting for statehood and against, the attempts that Trump is trying to make to sort of take away the autonomy of folks who live in D.C. And then there's one kickoff that is Women's March, that is Gender Liberation Movement, that is Generation Common Cause, Young Feminist Party, Feminist Front, that is sort of a bodily autonomy, gender and sexuality, reproductive rights, reproductive justice space. So there are a number of organizations, base building organizations, legal organizations that will really be in that space. And then there is an anti-war contingent that is held down by a rising majority, which is a coalition of organizations. But that kickoff is also co-sponsored by the Movement for Black Lives, by 350.org, and a number of other organizations. And there's another one kickoff that is around democracy and immigration that's organized by Popular Democracy, and they have a number of organizations across the country that they train up, they take action together, and then Sierra Club will be there holding down, the issues around climate. So there's a broad swath from organizations that are more left, organizations that are progressive, organizations that build big bases, like Popular Democracy or People's Action, and then organizations that, so just really a wide spread of organizations. So we're really proud. I think there's, somewhere around 300 organizations inside of the big coalition.
Okay. And so it does, I appreciate that description, because it's actually, a good, it's not quite a visual because we're on radio, but you know what I mean? Sort of a good visual of the thing that you just described about how you connect the dots, like how you, identify issues that people care deeply about, and give those organizations space to sort of talk about those issues. And then I imagine that those are the kickoffs, and then everyone comes together. That is like a really great reflection of, exactly, I think, what you all are talking about in terms of coalition building and solidarity, and solidarity building. When you all are talking to both the organizations, or the organizations are talking to their members, you mentioned a number of organizations that I know have grassroots memberships across the country. How are you all talking to them? How are you talking about the stakes, right? The sort of breadth of the far right extremism that we are going to be facing. How are you laying that out, right? Why it's important to do this march, because there's obviously a thing in front of us that we're trying to confront.
I mean, I think the different organizations that have different stakes that things that are really up for them. Like all the organizations that are doing immigration work or connected to immigration work are really doing a lot of immigration defense and preparation. And so they're talking about this moment and this mobilization as an opportunity to really visibilize that struggle, but also a lot of the organizations are talking about this moment as an opportunity to build skills together. So they're, Rising Majority in particular, alongside M4BL, is hosting an assembly and a teach-in, so people can right after the rally ends, so that people can really be building their skills. And so there's a lot of different ways. Like I know Popular Democracy has been having hype calls. They've had I think maybe 3 of these hype calls where they're talking to the folks in their base about, one, this moment as an opportunity to really kick off their organizing with their community members. Like, hey, talk to your folks, bring them to the march and help them get galvanized into the work. But also really laying out, like, this is, immigration stuff is up, democracy is a big question, you know. And I think another thing that people are really talking about, of course, everything that's happening with the war, but Project Esther and the attacks on organizations and nonprofits, the groundwork they're laying there. So those are some of the things that people are laying out. Okay, well, we're going to come back on to that. I know you also said you want to get back to the conversation we were having earlier about mis and disinformation, and so I want to get into that and talk a little bit more about the Women's March as well when we come forward with Tamika Middleton, the managing director at the Women's March, right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Immediate evacuations are being issued as a new fire breaks out in Los Angeles. The Archer Fire is burning in the Granada Hills neighborhood next to Interstate 5. This new fire broke out late Friday morning and started spreading quickly. Meta is ending key diversity programs and disbanding its DEI team effective immediately. Employees are criticizing the move, which follows recent policy shifts like ending fact-checking. A federal civil rights complaint targets Washington, D.C. public schools over an empowerment club for Black and African identifying girls. Parents Defending Education claims it violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. The Office for Civil Rights has not announced if it will investigate. And St. Cloud, Florida denounced its racist past as a sundown town in a city council proclamation. Councilmember Jennifer Paul, the first Black member, called it a step toward unity and healing. I'm Amber Payton on the Black Information Network, your home for Black News First.
It's in the Tarzana Woodland Hills area. They're just trying to make sure that the fire from the Palisades doesn't come out this way. So things are okay and everything is under control with that particular fire. Let's also check out the drive on the 101. We're looking at the northbound side. Delays in Encino, heavy from the 405 and stretches ahead to Winnetka heading into Woodland Hills. Southbound slowing in Studio City from Coldwater Canyon to the 170, 134 and ahead in Hollywood from Santa Monica Boulevard into downtown Los Angeles.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice. Continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The neutral site for the Rams playoff game Monday night against the Vikings appears to be favoring the Vikings. After the NFL made the decision to move the game from SoFi Stadium to Glendale, Arizona, the point spread went up for the Vikings from 1 point to 2.5. Tickets for the game at State Farm Stadium go on sale today at noon. It'll be interesting to see how many Rams and Vikings fans can make the late travel adjustment to get to Glendale, a Phoenix suburb. The Lakers confirmed that coach J.J. Redick is among the residents in Pacific Palisades who lost their home. Redick and his family were renting a house in the town, which has lost over 5,300 structures to the wildfires in L.A. County. Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr, who grew up in Pacific Palisades, lost his childhood home. Kerr's mother and other family members were evacuated on Tuesday. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yeah, yo, come on. Pick up the drums.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we fight the power every day.
Yeah, gotta give us what we want. Gotta give us what we need. Hey.
I listen to KBLA and I love the commercials. I know what the commercials mean. I also, if I'm looking and trying to figure something out, I need something to talk to me that might hit me. And it happens on TV because, every time they show a sporting event, they got the pharmaceutical companies back to back to back telling people how to fix the sickness on the same stuff that they sell them. So we get it.
Yep, we get it too, Chuck D. And that's why at KBLA Talk 1580, we don't black down.
Drop it! Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power! Fight the power! Fight the power!
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code NEWS. Visit lifelock.com. Terms apply.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Worried about eviction? You have rights, and Stay Housed LA can help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between LA County, the City of Los Angeles, and local service providers. From Lancaster to Long Beach, we're here to help you with tenant education workshops, legal clinics, free legal services for eligible tenants, and online resources about tenant protection laws. Don't face eviction alone. Call our hotline at 1-888-694-0040. That's 1-888-694-0040. Or visit stayhousedla.org. Stay Housed LA, keeping Los Angeles residents in their homes. Stay Housed LA, your rights, your home, our community. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
You're inside the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the Black Pack. I am your host, Adrianne Shropshire, and we have been talking with Tamika Middleton, the managing director of the Women's March, about the People's March that is coming up next Saturday on January 18th that is going to bring together, I like the idea that you said, Tamika, a coalition of coalitions, hundreds of organizations from across the country representing various issues and constituencies, all standing up against what we know is going to be not just a administration that is going to be very dangerous for our communities through the implementation of its Project 2025. I feel like we're not talking about that enough these days. Once we got to the other side of the election, I think we still need to be letting people know and informing them of what the priorities of this administration are going to be. But on Saturday, January 18th, we will see folks come together and say, not on our watch in Washington, D.C. Tamika, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Women's March, because I do think that for many people, they think it was just a march, and so and not an actual organization, which feels important in terms of, I think, what you were raising before about the importance of sort of creating opportunities to bring folks in. So I wanted to ask you to talk just a little bit about what the work and the focus of the organization is.
Absolutely. So we at Women's March see our political mandate as really building the feminist resistance to fascism. And of course, when the first march happened, it was in reaction to the election of a fascist in the form of Donald Trump. And so from the very beginning, it's been sort of a building against that motion, that progress towards the rise of fascism. And we continue to see that happening. And we were really clear for us, although we were very clear that the election in November in the presidential election was absolutely a flashpoint moment, because it let us know whether we would have this fascism in the form of in the seat of the president. But we also were really clear that on the local and state level across the country for the past 8 years, even without a Trump in office, that creep towards fascism was continuing to grow. And so that's really what we have been up to and what we continue to be up to. And so we do that. We think of our interventions in 3 ways. That first one is to really build a feminist movement, cohere a feminist movement. There are a lot of organizations that are doing really amazing feminist work, and we are not necessarily doing them in coordination, in collaboration, in formation with each other. And so, and there's also this we're in this moment where with the young people, there's sort of a rise in this feminist sentiment, but there's still broadly across the country a sort of rejection of feminism. And even what we just saw, I don't know if you've seen, I think yesterday or today, the Heritage Foundation released this paper where they're saying they are trying to claim feminism and to reject the things that have been core to feminist values. And so they're trying to claim it and rewrite it in their own image. And so for us, it feels very important to build and bring feminist organizations together and build a legible feminist movement that can be in conversation with feminist movements across the globe. So that's our first sort of intervention. Our second one is just to once, as we're building that movement, to bring everyday folks into that movement. So everyday women, everyday with the allies of everyday women, and one, as I said earlier, one of the ways we do that is through these mass mobilizations. And once we've got those folks in, our third intervention is really to train those folks and to build our muscle for mass protest and dissent. So how do we train folks and build their feminist identity? How do we give them the kinds of skills they'll need to organize and to do protests? How do we connect them to each other so that they are in formation to activate when we need them to activate? So that's sort of how we think about our work. But I did want to talk about, when you were talking about misinformation and disinformation, one of our core programs is our Digital Defenders program. And we've, over the years, trained thousands of women in how to combat misinformation and disinformation online. So we run trainings on QAnon, we run trainings on abortion, misinformation and disinformation. So we continue to do that. We actually have a training coming on Thursday online where folks can go on our website, on our Instagram to find out more information. But we have a training on Thursday because we know, as you were saying, we know that the misinformation and disinformation is going to ramp up significantly from day one of this new administration. And so we're trying to get our folks prepared to fight back in their networks and to combat that misinformation and disinformation.
Can you? I was actually gonna ask you how you're talking to your members about what they can do to engage in this moment. And so it sounds like some of the online trainings, the digital defenders, exactly what we were talking about before about how are we combating mis and disinformation, particularly in the Black community, making sure that people have some form of media literacy, that they're not sharing and amplifying mis and disinformation. Can you just give? Are there any details on that Thursday training that you could share with listeners?
Absolutely. So we have, there are some sort of media experts that we work with and have been in partnership with, and they will be leading this training on Thursday. And it is Thursday at 7, and you can go on our Instagram, the link, or maybe on our website. I think it's on our website now.
And what's the website?
womensmarch.com.
Okay.
And you can go on there and you can find the link to register for that training. And in the training, they will have a lot of the ways we think about our digital defenders work and how we think about our work broadly is very distributed, right? Women's March doesn't have chapters. We don't have, like we at one point tried to do building circles, and we really felt like a distributed network model worked best because people can really organize the people who they are in relationship with on a regular basis. Right. And so how we run these trainings is to help people figure out and learn how to have conversations with their folks in their own networks, right? It's easier. Grandma might hear better about how the thing that she's watching or the thing that meme that she's sharing is not real, right?
Right.
And so we train folks to have those hard conversations within their networks. And so I will, so that is one thing. And
within your network can mean within your family. Because the grandma example, how you talk to your granny about not sharing crazy stuff on Facebook.
Exactly. Talk to, Sister Gladys from the church, like the folks that you know personally, that you are connected to, and how we train, how we share information, because that's a great way to disseminate that information. Because when you talk to your auntie, she's going to talk to her friends and say, oh, no, I learned from my niece that this is not, And so that's the kind of way that we try to build is within our existing networks. We feel like that is one of the most efficient ways to build is within our existing networks. And so that's what we are training people to do, is to fight that disinfo in those networks. So it's 8 o'clock on Thursday.
8 o'clock. And that's Eastern.
Eastern time, yes. 8 p.m.
So 5 p.m. Pacific.
Yes, thank you. I'm born and bred on the East Coast, and that East Coast supremacy be real.
It's sort of time is wherever you are, because I lived on the East Coast. I lived in New York for a long time, and that is how I understood the world. And then as soon as I moved back to LA, I was like, I don't know what the East Coast is. I don't know what is this Eastern time you speak of. We're gonna on the other side continue this conversation, because I do want to come back a little bit to around the conversation about mis and disinformation, but also particularly the way we're seeing things fold out, even here, like in real time in Los Angeles, where we see the right reacting in particular ways to kind of climate crisis. So I want to get your thoughts on that as well when we come forward. This is the Black Pack here on KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
The holidays can be a time of increased stress for those struggling with opioid or stimulant addiction. They can also be a time for pause, reflection, opportunity, and new beginnings. This holiday season, choose treatment and recovery. Embrace the company of family and friends and create special moments. Find a proven opioid or stimulant addiction treatment provider near you at choosechangeca.org.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you in tough times, connecting you with resources and what you need to know. Evacuation shelters are located in the Pasadena Civic Center, the Dream Center in LA, the Westwood Recreation Center, and many more. You can call 311 for details. If you're in Los Angeles County and in need of food, call Omni Ministries at 310-631-1557. Donations can be made to Zelle, Omni Ministries, Inc. at yahoo.com. Parking Lot I outside of Rose Bowl Stadium is a pop-up mutual aid hub where you can pick up everything from clothing to food to hygiene supplies for free. To volunteer or donate to help victims of the fire, contact the LA Emergency Network at enla.org. The Cochran Firm and Ivy McNeil, Wyatt Purcell and Diggs, Jasmine Canick, and others have launched a GoFundMe specifically targeting Altadena. Visit LA Fires, the impacted Black community urgently needs help on GoFundMe, and donate to help Black evacuees fighting for survival. Airbnb is offering free temporary housing to people displaced by the fires. Call 211 to sign up. The LA Chamber of Commerce is stepping up to help you sort out insurance claims and other paperwork. Reach them at 213-580-7500. South LA Cafe has free groceries, clothing, and water available at 1700 Browning Boulevard in LA. Track their giveaways or volunteer through their Instagram at South LA Cafe. U-Haul is donating short-term storage free of charge for 30 days to evacuees. Shelter for small or large animals can be accessed by calling 211. A Black-led coalition of community organizations is offering support and resources in the Altadena area at the Flint Ridge Center at 236 West Mountain Street in Pasadena. For comprehensive lists of resources for housing, food, shelter, and more, visit Mutual Aid LA Network on Instagram. Praying for LA and standing with you. KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back with Tamika Middleton, the managing director of the Women's March. We talked about the People's March that is coming up in Washington, D.C. next Saturday, January 18th, bringing together hundreds of organizations to stand up to what we know is going to be an administration that will wreak havoc on the country and on our communities, all while trying to completely undermine the pillars of democracy that we all know are holding up what we have of a democracy thus far. Tamika, I wanted to, and thank you for sort of, talking about the work that you all do specifically at the Women's March in making sure that, women are engaged. There's a couple of things that I wanted to ask you. There's certainly the information, right, about the training this Thursday on avoiding or combating mis and disinformation. You talked about the heritage, and I had not seen the heritage paper that you mentioned earlier that they put out about attempting to, I think you'll correct me if I'm wrong, to claim feminism while rejecting all of the values and principles that feminist theory rests on, is what you said. Exactly. And so one of the things that I think that's always, complex, right? And I think that this is why, an institution like the Heritage Foundation could sort of swoop in and say, "Oh no, we too claim feminism," is because there is not a widely held understanding or definition of what feminism is. And so for our listeners, can you just sort of, I'm sure that you all have whole, piles of large, I want to say documents, but we don't really have documents anymore, do we? Binders full of things, definitions.
Google Doc.
Right. Yes, exactly. Tell us what's in your Google Doc as how you all define feminism and why it's important, particularly in this moment.
So absolutely. So at the very kind of baseline level, we start with Bell Hooks' definition of feminism as a movement to end sexism, exploitation, and oppression. And then from there, we have the great pleasure of having Barbara Smith of the Columbia River Collective as one of our senior advisors at Women's March. Wow. And she, so we also lean very heavily on the Columbia River Collective statement that has shaped so much of Black feminist theory in the years since, that really thinks about feminism as a movement, a movement to end exploitation and oppression broadly, not just exploitation and oppression of women in particular, but exploitation and oppression broadly, because women hold so many different identities, right? That really the Columbia River Collective statement uplifting the intersection between gendered oppression and also racist oppression and also class oppression and also homophobic oppression and cis heteropatriarchal oppression. And so for us, we hold in a definition of feminism that encompasses all those things, that holds the reality of our trans brothers and sisters, that holds the reality of our immigrant brothers, siblings, that holds the reality of all of our folks, and that seeks to end oppression broadly with a focus on understanding cis heteropatriarchy at the crux of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the things that is, like I said, is important for we're talking about feminism and the sort of, you talked about sort of growing, cohering, I think you said, a feminist movement in this country, it is important to provide definition around that so that people understand what we're talking about, so that they can see themselves in that. But also, and this is, this speaks a little bit to mis and disinformation also, that that they know what it is not. Right. And so what it is not is, I think there was also, I don't know in which publication I saw this in today, but there was maybe it was the Washington Post, an article about, how the Trump administration will be more diverse than the first administration. Well, first of all, it's a low bar. So you could add, whatever, and be more diverse. But it was focused specifically on how he will have twice as many women in his administration. And so I did not know about the Heritage Foundation paper saying that they too are feminists. I did know about this article, and I thought when I read it, I thought, well, what is this about, right? And so I can see those connections now, right? This sort of attempt to sort of woo more women. When we think about the fact that during the last election, Trump actually won more white women than he did in his first than he did in 2020, right? So there's something happening there that I think it's important that we make sure that we are helping people understand and define what we are talking about, so that folks aren't confused when the mis and disinformation about what feminist movements in the past or now are, that they are not confused by them. So thank you for putting that out there. I want to talk about, because we're obviously here in Los Angeles, where we're dealing with fires are still burning. I talked at the start of the show about how I was so happy to see folks who had to be outside and moving around wearing masks. So there's sort of the real presence of the fires, whether you are close to them or not. But we're also dealing with this sort of not only mis and disinformation, but an attempt to use the catastrophe, right, to use this crisis that we find ourselves in to sort of to move a political agenda, right? So we've got national right-wing figures, folks, Trump, himself and others talking about, threatening to withhold federal funds from California unless California, sort of bends the knee, right? I think I heard one Congress member saying, California has to change all of its policies that we don't agree with. It has nothing to do with climate change. Some of it can do with climate change, some of it not. But California has to change all the its policies that we don't agree with if they ever want to get federal money. And so there is this coercion, right? That it feels like is definitely a part of the rhetoric and probably the governing, right, of this new administration, and it'll be around a whole host of issues. We're also seeing it, in that you have the attacks on Governor Newsom. But there's a particular way in which this is landing on Black women and Black women leaders. And so we talked also about, you had this sort of attempt to undermine the leadership of the Black mayor in New Orleans when the terrorist attack happened, and now you have this attempt to undermine the Black woman mayor of Los Angeles and disparage her and her leadership. I want to just get your thoughts on that, because when we think about the need to shore up, to push back against the attacks on women, and particularly Black women in this era of Trump, especially a constituency within our country that Trump was very clear, right, and said publicly, that he knew he would never get any support from. And so what does that mean, right, when you think about an administration and a political party that is bent on retribution, right, that is bent on revenge and punishing those that do not who will not bend the knee. And I think that Black women have said over and over again that Black women will not bend the knee. And so what does that mean for us in this new era?
I mean, first and foremost, I just want to start by saying, that the climate question and the right reaction to climate disaster and the ways in which they frame climate disaster, especially as it relates to people of color, is really very important to me. As you know, this year is the 20th anniversary of Katrina,
right.
And I live in New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans when Katrina hit, and was an evacuee from Katrina, from Hurricane Katrina, and can remember very, very vividly in my bones the reaction and the misinformation and disinformation that was spreading about all of us who lived in New Orleans at that time. And the ways in which that misinformation and disinformation led to criminalization and government capture of the entire school system, right. And the advancing of a right-wing political agenda even at that time. And that's 20 years ago, right? So I think so much of this conversation, like if we really put it in the historical context, you know, we see these things, we have lessons to learn, right? And so I just wanted to start there. And in all the ways that, you know, that Black women bear the burdens, you know, the most heavily in all of these, you know, circumstances and in all ways, right? And I think, you know, where Donald Trump has been very, very vocal during his entire campaign about the ways in which he was going to crush his opposition. Everything that we have seen, the way they have been laying the foundation for attacks on nonprofits, the Project 2025 policies on government employees who dissent and who oppose. So we know that is what we're walking into, and I think that is, for me, why it is so important for us to be organizing and to be organized, because we know we'll have to protect our folks. So much of this next period will be about holding a line and protecting our people. And that means, of course, from deportation, of course from incarceration, of course from you know, physical violence and state violence, but also that means from the kind of state violence that comes from attack from the government. And so I think that feels so important in this time.
And it also is the reason why the People's March next Saturday in D.C. Is going to be so important, because it is the opening salvo of saying we will resist. So Tamika Middleton, from the Women's March, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing what you all are doing and giving people ways that they can also plug in. I appreciate you joining us. This is the Black Pack. We will be back next Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. Please stay safe. Please look for resources if you need them. KBLA has a number of resources that you can tap into on its social media pages and on its website. Stay safe, and I will see or talk to you all next Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. here at KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Los Angeles cut $17.5 million from its firefighting budget before the Pacific Palisades wildfire, while police funding rose by $126 million. The current city budget signed by Black Mayor Karen Bass includes about $819 million for firefighting, down from more than $837 million in the previous fiscal year. The New Orleans City Council has voted to begin investigations into the New Year's Day attack, focusing